Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Shannon Thompson, and I'm the Story Center Program Manager for Mid-Continent Public Library. Today, I want to welcome you to our 8th annual local author fair. Today, we'll be having 3 panels of 4 authors each to talk about the process of writing and publishing. Today's panel at 12:30 will feature Brian Gehrlein, Jessica Horne, LeAnne Litka, and Stephanie Young. At the end, we will be having a question and answer part, so please put your questions in the chat below. And I will go ahead and introduce our first author, Brian Gehrlein.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Gehrlein. I wrote this book here. I did not do the illustrations. Those were from Tom Knight. I cannot draw a stick figure to save my life, but really excited about this book. It published on Tuesday. I'm a high school English teacher, and a little bit about the book. It is an interactive read aloud that would be fun for bedtime with 2, or have a rambunctious story hour with 32 at a classroom or library. And the premise of the book is that you have to follow the rules or Dennis the monster will eat you. So kind of invites the kids into a fun bit of imagination and play. And you have to be careful and listen really carefully, or else you're going to get eaten.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Jessica Horne.
Hello, my name is Jessica Horne, and I represent the Jess Horne Kids Books brand. I am the author of 2 children's books, Tia's Tingles and Tia's New Neighbor. I published my first book, Tia's Tingles, in 2017, and I recently published my second book, Tia's New Neighbor, this July. I'm working on my third book for next year. Both of these books focus on mental health and wellness for children.
Thank you, Jessica. Next up, we'll be hearing from LeAnne Litka.
LeAnne Litka, and I wrote, what's that sound? Whoops, there it is. It describes the letter-sound relationship to early readers, and I currently work at a school for kids with diagnosed learning disabilities, and I have a great interest in this because 2 of my own had learning disabilities, and there's just a big difference between the letter's name and the letter sound and how we use it, and my book describes that.
Thank you, LeAnne. And last but not least, let's hear from Stephanie Young.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Young. I am the writer and co-creator of Starbeast. Allison Lassiter is the illustrator. It just came out this summer, and it's a middle grade graphic novel, kind of like Star Trek meets Zootopia. So pets and animals in space going on missions to save Earth. And it's great for like anybody 7 and up.
That was so neat. It was so nice to hear from all 4 of the authors. We're going to go ahead and jump into a panel with all 4 of us. And first question that we have, I'd love to ask what inspired you to write this particular book. LeAnne, did you want to go first?
Sure, I will. I was working at an inner city school, and I noticed there was a little boy in 3rd grade who did not know his letter sounds. And he was much like one of my sons. And my heart just really went out to him. And I began thinking of what I could do. So the book originally was just for one person. And one day, actually, on a long car ride, as I was thinking about what I was going to do, the words just kind of were downloaded into my brain. And it just kind of over time, it felt like it was bigger than just for one person. And just one thing led to another, and it just sort of opened up into a big project.
Brian?
Yeah. So I was a special education paraprofessional at Liberty Oaks Elementary School in Liberty, Missouri, and in 2017, the fall of 2017. And through just the course of seeing kids and teachers navigate their day, I got this, the first part of the book, the opening narration just hit me like a train. This book has rules. You must follow the rules or be eaten. Be eaten by what? And so then that afternoon, that fall, I remember sitting down in our kitchen at our apartment, and just the whole thing came out, and kind of in one sitting. And it was just for fun. It was just a silly book that I didn't think was going to be anything, and I didn't do anything with it for years. Later on, when I had my first agent, we were trying to figure out what we might send out next, and I was looking through folders, and I was like, oh yeah, there's this little book, and so I kind of pitched it to my Twitter-based critique group, and they were like, this is delightful, this is fun. And then Stephanie Young, actually, that summer, 2019, was part of an in-person critique group. They gave wonderful feedback and encouraged me. And a few months later, it was sold as my debut book deal. So kind of went from nothing just for fun to a whole-on book here.
And critique partners are so important. Let's hear from Stephanie Young then.
Yeah, so Starbeast, like I said, I co-created it with Allison Lassiter, the illustrator. We worked together, and we just joined a team together, and she walked up to me one day and said, hey, would you want to write a comic together? And I'd written YA and middle grade and things like that, but never a comic book. So I had to teach myself how to write a comic book. And I wrote the whole graphic novel in about 6 months. And we sold it as individual floppy copies, like a traditional comic book, for a little while, self-published. And then we decided to go ahead and pitch it to comic book companies. And we cold sold it at comic book shows, and it just came out this summer. So, and the idea kind of came from, we were both like, we love our pets, we love sci-fi, let's put our pets in space and help them save the world, because who doesn't want to believe that their pet is the one that's really going to help them save the planet and the world.
I love that. I love pets in space. Jessica, what inspired you to write your piece?
What inspired me was mental health and wellness awareness for children, and children of color specifically. The idea came to me, I was in graduate school actually, and I was on an internship at a facility, and I was doing a group with children. And I love books, and I was like, what's the best way to have this conversation about feelings and emotions? And the better way was, for me, it was books. And so I was searching, because the population that I was working with at the time, they were children of color, and I was searching for books that showed characters that looked like them. And it was hard for me. And this is at the time. Since then, I've met other authors and I've networked with other people and illustrators who have done wonderful work. But at the time, I was like, I could just write a book who have these characters and that has that topic. And so that is what inspired me. And I came up with Tia as the main character. And I've just been rocking with Tia ever since. and that was my inspiration, and I just went from there.
That's amazing. It is always really interesting to me to hear what has inspired someone's piece, but inspiration is one thing and taking action to actually write the piece is another. I would love to hear about what your writing process is like. If Leanne, you wanted to start?
Yes, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I write 3 pages longhand, just stream of consciousness before I do anything. I've learned to I just write, and what I have learned is to maybe fold the page over or put a star or highlight if I think something is especially brilliant, because I have a stack about this high of notebooks, and it makes it easier to locate some of my brilliance, because sometimes I get really tickled, but then I can't go back and find it. Also, all day long, I keep paper and pen with me, and I write myself little notes, stuff it in my jean jacket. I have a big drawer that I throw things in. I also have a file of things that are developing. And if I have an idea for something that's kind of in development, instead of putting it in the drawer, I'll stick it in the file. And then periodically I get that out and can put all the pieces together. I also have a big, beautiful box called the Black Hole. And there I put horrible things. I don't throw them away. So sometimes my art or my writing, I don't like it. So I put it in there to ferment. And what I've noticed is something happens to it, and I can go back and find something that I like. And I've learned that from throwing stuff away in despair and then wanting to go back to it. So I do save stuff.
I love that. I love that you hold on to all your writing, even when you're not feeling it in that moment. Brian, what is your writing process like?
That's a great, I want to piggyback off that, just the idea that I think writers have to be a little bit of an idea hoarder, whether that's the digital hoarder with various drafts in all kinds of Google Drive folders or Dropbox, whatever it is, or literal actual folders of ideas. I'm a big Post-it note guy, and my students over time figure out that if they want me to do something and want me to follow through in a timely manner, they're like, Gehrlein, you need to write that down on a Post-it note because they know. But as for process, I'm a big believer in getting the first draft out fast. If I don't finish a first draft almost in like a single setting, and that can take a couple hours where it can take shorter. If I don't capture it when it's really raw and clear in my mind, it's hard to follow through. And so I'll have, idea hoarding. I've got all kinds of stuff in various stages, and I write picture books. So we're talking anywhere between like 100 and 1,000 words with stages of development, various places. But so far I've observed the stuff that's lasted that I guess has a chance that we might sell or that I like. I sit down and I get it out. Where the real magic happens is revising. And that's where I think the job of the writer kicks in. Sometimes you have to have a first draft sit in the crock pot. That's what I call it for me, where it just, for the book of rules, it sat in the crock pot for 2 years. I did nothing with it. It was just for funsies. And life gives you perspective and you see things with a fresh vision. So revising, going back, cutting things out, figuring out what it is, because you don't always know what something is the first time you do it. And sometimes it takes time to figure out what that is. So.
Stephanie, what is your writing process like?
Yeah, well, I'm a planner. I tend to plan out my plots. I get the initial idea. It usually comes to me actually, honestly, like swimming or walking or doing something physical, and then I plan it out. And I am a big believer in revision. And I've learned now on the few things I've written that I will write at least 10 drafts of something. And I will do different things at different steps. I'll write the whole thing out, I'll plan it out, then I'll write the whole thing, I'll rewrite it, and then I storyboard. And especially when it comes to writing graphic novels, storyboarding really, really helps you think through the scenes and think about what a picture needs to do versus what the dialogue needs to do. So I do a lot of storyboarding as well. But I do take about 10 drafts, 10 swings at it before I feel like, all right, this is it. So, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of drafts.
It is for me. I wish it was quicker, but it's not.
That's good to hear. It takes dedication. And I think that'll inspire a lot of writers who are struggling through those first few drafts to know that there can be success in revising and revising and revising. Jessica, I would love to hear what your writing process is like.
Yeah, my writing, okay. So I told you guys that I was in graduate school when the idea came to me. That was in 2013. I also told you I didn't publish until 2017. The writing, putting it on the paper, putting it on the page, and the ideas were spewing out. I didn't have a problem with, writing and coming up with the subject and the plot and the setting. It was the confidence to publish it that was the hardest. I held on to these drafts that I had for so long until someone said, a close friend of mine said, what are you doing, girl? Like, this is kind of good. Like, someone, wants to hear this. Someone needs to hear this. And so I will say the writing process itself, it was fairly easy in the first book. The second book that was a process. That was something because I wanted it, when you're writing something else, something that your first book was kind of like your baby and you put it out there into the world. And then the second book, it's like, I wanted to be just as good, and feeling that pressure in your writing. I think that took a toll on the process for me because I was thinking so much about what other people would think. But eventually it all came out and it just all became clear. So yeah, it was bumpy both times, I guess. The writing part itself was okay, but just the confidence to produce it was the bumpy part for me.
I love that you mentioned to have the confidence to publish, because it is the perfect segue into our next topic. I would love to hear how you got that confidence to publish, what type of publishing you chose, and why you chose that type of publishing. Leanne, would you like to go first?
Sure, I will. My publishing just kind of fell in my lap through an acquaintance. I had belonged to a writers group, and I had to quit because my youngest son was driving me crazy trying to get him graduated from high school. So I just had to focus all my efforts on that kid. I promised myself the moment he graduated that I would find my group again. So literally the day after he graduated, I called the one contact I had, and she said, "Oh, the group fell apart. But I've got a studio. I'm having a show. You can come see me." So I did. And I asked her, "Well, would you be able to get together with me and critique my work?" And she said, "Nope, I'm too busy." And she said, "Well, what else are you working on?" So I showed her my phone, and I was making fairy doors. And she said, "Oh, I'd kind of like to buy one." And so I went back to her studio with a fairy door, and she asked how much it was. And I said, 1 hour of your time. And so, how artists always like to trade.
Yeah.
So that's how I got a critique. Little did I know that she had a Flying Ketchup press and had started her own press. And after taking a look at it and listening to what I felt about it, she offered me a publishing contract. And so that's how I did it, through my fairy door.
That's great.
Sounds like the fairy door opened doors for you. That is
I know it, and they still are.
Yeah.
I'm still making them and giving them away. And I happen to be at a tiny little library in Northwest Iowa where I could have fast internet, and I promised them a fairy door for letting me use them after hours.
That is so neat. Brian, what type of publishing did you go with, and why did you choose that type of publishing?
Yeah, so I am, I guess what they say is traditionally published. So I have a literary agent, and so I have to get sold through my agent, and she pitches book projects to traditional publishing houses. And I wanted to go that route. I'm not exactly 100% sure. I've wanted to be published for a long time. In college, I'm a theater education major. And so my first kind of, adventure into writing in a real way was through being a playwright. And I got a few 10-minute plays produced locally in Kansas City with some 10-minute play festivals. And I just remember sitting in the theater, watching people respond to my words. And like, authors are kind of notoriously introverted, and we like to not be recognized maybe. And just being in that theater and knowing that no one really knew that was my work, but they were laughing, just giving me that feedback was just an out-of-body experience. In college, I remember we'd go down to the plaza in Kansas City to go to like Barnes & Noble or something just for fun. And I would wander into the kids section and not really know why I was doing it. It was just very strange, but I kept being drawn to that. So there's something about the medium of picture books that I thought blended a really nice theatrical ability or technique, which felt very familiar to me as an actor and as a playwright, because it's visual, but it's auditory as a medium, because kids aren't reading picture books generally; they're being read to, and so I think that that experience felt very natural to me. So as far as traditional publishing I went through kind of a crazy ordeal to get there, and I don't know why I didn't quit, but I was rejected 600 times before I got my agent. So I've not had a problem with confidence. I queried some real doozies that I would never try to query again, that were just not ready. And I was just like, I want to get published. I want to get an agent. And so I queried pretty aggressively for 2 years and amounted 600 rejections, got some good positive feedback along the way, and they told me to keep going, and it just happened. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing your rejection stories too, because I think so many aspiring writers don't know how much rejection they might face, and they might let that get them down. So it's nice to hear an encouraging story about continuing on through that rejection. And Stephanie, why did you choose your type of publishing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually started off writing like YA novels, and I worked for about 3 years through SCBWI trying to get an agent, and I got an agent with a YA novel, but she wasn't able to sell it. And in the end, and what was funny was when I started working on Starbeast, like I said, I didn't know anything about how to write a comic. I'd read comics for years. And when Lassie and I got together to do this project, I said, hey, I'm going to write this thing all the way through like a graphic novel. And she was like, all right, I want to set a publishing goal. Like we set goals for ourselves, like right away of what we wanted to do to self-publish. And when we started off setting up at comic book shows, we have uniforms that we wear, matching spacesuit uniforms that we wear. We have a whole look going on. And we went to several comic book shows, and that's when we decided, hey, let's pitch it to actual comic book companies at the show. And we created a pitch packet and walked up to major comic book publishers and handed them the pitch packet and did our spiel. And we got at least 3 bites off of that just by hand selling it ourselves. And so I felt like I learned a lot of like, you know, the tradition of publishing route I love very much. But also there is something to like embodying your story and walking up to an editor and telling it to them that really got our foot in the door into the graphic novel world.
That is so neat. I love the idea of also being able to meet those authors in person. And usually we have our local author fair in person here at Woodneath Library Center. The last 2 years we've been virtual, but we hope we can be in person again next year because that sort of interaction is really priceless.
Yes.
Jessica, would you like to share with us how you chose your type of publishing?
Sure. I decided to do self-publishing. I just, it took me so long to even want to publish that when I wanted to publish, I was like, let's just do this before I like lose that confidence that I've gained. let's just put it out there. I knew exactly how I wanted the book to look. I knew exactly what I wanted it to say. I knew what I wanted the characters to look like. And I just had this, already strong sense of what I wanted the book to be, that I just went forward with. I moved forward with self-publishing in that moment. Is it rough? It can be, yes. I have not had the experience of traditional publishing yet, and so I can't speak to the pros and cons of traditional publishing versus self-publishing, but I can say that self-publishing does have its rewards and it has its cons. Was it rewarding for me? I can say yes, it was rewarding for me. And there were just, bumps along the way that I had to ask about, and I had to network myself. I had to really put my feet to the ground on a lot of things as a self-publisher. But yeah, I chose self-publishing and I haven't turned back. And so that's what I've done. Yeah.
That is so neat. What always strikes me about these conversations is how different every writer's journey is. No matter how many writers you sit down with and you ask them, what inspires you? What was your writing process like? Or what is your publishing journey like? You get different answers every time. But now that we've talked about what inspires you and how you write and why you chose the type of publishing that you have done, I'd love to hear about the present and what you are working on right now and what your plans are for the future. Leanne, would you like to share?
Yes. Well, I have a couple of things I'm working on. One is a book called Shortville. It talks about the short vowel sounds, and it's kind of like it's kind of a cartoony thing where a little critter from Longstreet Zoo escapes and he starts changing things around the town. I actually have what's called a dummy in a flipbook app, and I'm using it with children right now in school, and they love it. However, I've sent it back out and nobody else has loved it, but I'm using kind of a dummy for kids, and it's actually very useful to me. I actually have another story called Tika and the Weavers, and it's set in South America because I love alpacas. And last summer, I was up at the Okoboji Lakes in a little antique shop visiting with a woman, and she had actually written a book about the Weavers when their family lived in Peru for a while. And so I asked her, I bought a book from her, and I felt like that was kind of a sign from the universe that I need to keep going on this project. It's kind of stuck. I've rewritten it probably 5 times, and it's not quite what I want yet. So I'm working on that.
That's fantastic. Brian, do you want to share with us?
Yes, I am right now working on #ThatDadLife because my wife and I are in a season where we're both high school teachers. She's the high school theater teacher at Liberty, and I'm a high school English teacher, and we have 2 under 3 until the day after Christmas when Peter turns 3. So right now is just a time of figuring out the balance between family and home life, and like figuring out where I can carve out space to be creative. And now there's this little guy that I have to champion and promote and do a lot of business type stuff with. We were just talking about before this started about the potentiality for, like, what does it look like to schedule time to make time, like, and dedicate it to creativity. Everyone here said 4:30 was like the thing, so I can't conceive of it.
I did not.
That's horrifying to me. And But okay, so what am I actually working on now? So I have a new agent. Shout out to Jennifer Matson with Andrea Brown Literary Agency. And we just went on submission literally on Tuesday when my book published, with a silly little book, hopefully my second book. A kind of a send up on the oversaturation of hibernating bear books. And so it's like anything but a quiet story. You would think it's a gentle, quiet story with the bear getting sleepy and finding a den to get cozy and go to bed, and kind of having those winter theme moments, but it's like absolute chaos. So it's kind of the opposite of what you'd think. We'll see if that sells. I still get rejected. I didn't stop at 600. I get rejected on sometimes. So there's lots of stuff in the pipeline that we're thinking of sending out. But it's just right now it's a season of like, be a dad, be a teacher, figure out your new normal, and be okay with that because there's time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, balance between writing and life is really difficult, I think, for every writer. So thank you for sharing that. Stephanie, what are you currently working on?
Yeah, so last year I wrapped up, we launched Starbeast this year, and last year I wrapped up writing a new middle grade graphic novel that that we're waiting to hear back on, so fingers crossed on all that. It's a Girl Goonies story that involves food, so another action adventure, which I love writing. And I'm actually just wrapped up getting a manuscript ready to self-publish a YA book about hunger in America, fiction book that I'm going to use to just fundraise money for Feeding America. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm actually dabbling back into a historical fiction novel that I started a long time ago, going back to revisit. You can't let those babies go sometimes. You got to keep working on them. And then in my other spare time, I write and draw a webcomic called Shakespeare Bites, which is basically food performing Romeo and Juliet. And it's like comic strips. Yeah. Awesome. I do that just for fun. So I've always got something cooking.
I love all the food that was mentioned. Yeah. I know earlier we were all meeting up in the StreamYard before we got started and talking about Thanksgiving. I think still Brian was saying he was going to be hungry this whole time.
Give me lunch.
Making it worse.
I want your pies, Stephanie.
Jessica, what are you currently working on?
Yeah, I am, like I said, I released Tia's New Neighbor in July. And so I'm still just marketing and putting it out there and making connections and selling Tia's New Neighbor. I do have the third Tia's book in my head. It's not quite down anywhere yet. I know exactly what I want to do. I don't know the words exactly, but so that is where I am. I'm just pushing Tia's New Neighbor and making connections and seeing how far she can go with where she is now. And then I'll be working on the third Tia book.
That's so neat. I always love to see those sequels keep coming out and building on that previous world that you've created.
Yeah.
Listening to you all and hearing about what you're currently writing is so inspiring to know that, once that book comes out, it's not the end of someone's journey. They can keep writing. But I also like to ask writers what they're currently reading, because so many of us started as readers who just loved books so much we had to create our own. So Leanne, would you like to tell us about what you're currently reading?
Yeah, well, I just cracked this open last night. It's Educating Alice, Adventures of a Curious Woman, about Pulitzer Prize winner Alice Steinbach. I'm just, she kind of leaves her life and goes off and explores. And I'm kind of always fascinated with that idea of kind of running away. My favorite book of all time is Ladder of Years by Ann Tyler, of a woman who runs away from her family. And, I've moved 4 times in my adult life, and, wherever I go, there I am. So I've never been able really to run away from myself. So I think that's my fantasy. I'm always drawn to biographies. I love to usually of maybe normal people, not so much celebrities. I just like to kind of study how people overcome, and then why do they write about it, and what do they sound like. So I'm usually drawn to biographies and writers' journals.
That is so neat. Thank you for sharing. Brian, what are you currently reading?
I don't read. I don't have time. I'm just kidding. But I've found a new love, a passion for audiobooks. And I feel like, and this is something I champion with my students all the time, like, it's okay to read an audiobook. Like, you can read and listen. So a lot of times that looks like washing bottles and dishes at the end of the day, listening to books, or this summer, like I finished the Giver series over audio while I was mowing my lawn. I'm really into that, mowing and reading. It's a nice way to actually be successful at multitasking, because I'm kind of a typical male, can only do one thing at a time usually, but I can actually multitask if I mow my lawn and listen to a book. Besides like listening or reading picture books for mentor text, research, reading to my kids. It's a hard season right now to find time to read outside of that format. The one that's on my holds list right now that's really frustrating is Dune, the sci-fi spectacular. I watched on HBO Max, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I really like, this is a multiple movie. Like, I have to wait to keep watching, and I gotta read this book. So I'm like, surely there'll be an available audio copy, and I put it on hold, and I'm like number 435 out of 130. And I've like never
I love when
seen
that happens
on Midcontinent. Like, what? I have to wait that long for an audio? That's quite a bit faster. And so, yeah, everybody wants to read Dune right now, and I want to finally read that book. Yeah.
I'm also a huge fan of audiobooks. There's nothing like driving home and being able to just listen to your book and make progress on a book, or like you said, doing dishes, doing any sort of chores. It's a really quick way to keep reading and enjoying stories. So I definitely recommend everyone check out the Overdrive app with Mid-Continent Public Library and trying out those audiobooks, though you might have to wait for certain ones like Dune.
Not cool.
Stephanie, what are you reading right now?
It's funny. I just finished reading one of my favorite authors, Kate DiCamillo, The Beatrice Prophecy. It just came out, and it's funny. I read it through, and for enjoyment, and then I'm turning around and reading it through to study it. She's just she's a master, and it's so wonderful. And then comic-wise, I just finished reading Stepping Stones by Lucy Knisley, and it's a middle grade graphic novel about sisters. And she's a wonderful, if you ever want to get into graphic novels, she actually has a great series more for adults, but it's her biography. She writes biographies of herself. And she's a fantastic graphic novel artist and author.
I love that you mentioned reading not just for pleasure, but to go back and read it again and study it for craft. I think that's really important. Thank you for bringing that up. Mm-hmm. Jessica, what are you currently reading?
So this past year, I've become a serial book starter and not finisher. And it's annoying one of my best friends, who's my book buddy, We just have a 2-person book club that we go back and forth with, and we read together. And yeah, so right now I've started Children of Blood and Bone.
Oh, so
I did not finish it. The library gave me an opportunity to read the hard copy and the Audible, and I still didn't get through either, but I am going to finish it.
yes, so good.
Yeah, it start. Yeah, the beginning was really good. I can't speak to the end. But, I'm also in the middle of When No One's Watching. So yeah, she's really upset with me about not finishing that one because she's already done. We can't talk about it because I'm not done. So, those are the main 2 books. I also put Verity on hold, but so that's what I do. I put books on hold and then I start them and then I finish them. But yes, those are the 2 books I'm in the middle of.
Oh, I hear you. Go ahead.
I was going to mention, and my son, because I try to assist him in reading books. He's in the middle of Tristan Strong. And if you're listening and you know him, yes, he's still in the middle of Tristan Strong. We're both serial starters in our
I admit I do that as well because I just love the beginning of books, especially science fiction and fantasy, because that's where all that interesting new world building is. Yeah. So I've been there too.
I do it, but for charity for the library, because I just let them sit on my nightstand and then they amass late fees and then we have to pay them. So I'm just all the time by not finishing stuff, but it's for charity, really. It's not because
So now that we heard what you all are writing and reading currently, I'd love to just get into like the nitty gritty of your writing tips. What is the most unique writing tip or important writing tip that you have for writers watching right now? Leanne, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, the most important thing is to write. For me, for years, I struggled with all the different types of writing that I did and wanted to do, and how do I organize that? And I would start different notebooks and different systems. The most important thing that probably helped me was to compartmentalize. So I have a journal by my bed that I've kept since my 30s, and that one that one is probably going to be for my daughter. My children, grandchildren, if there are any, can read that. And I modeled that after reading my great-grandmother's diaries. And I would always be tickled if there was something about current events in there. So I tried to write a little bit about current events and what my point of view was. Then also I have the early morning 4 a.m. stream of consciousness. The stack is I've been doing that for 7 years. The stack is really high. My husband has directions to burn that if I'm upon my untimely demise, because I don't want anybody to see it, because it was incredibly honest and it is hidden away. And someday I do need to deal with that. But that is where I can really be me. And just that kind of keeps me sane. And I do write horrible things about people I'm mad at, usually my family. So anyway, that's awful. But, you got to have that sometime. And then I have the things that I work on. And I've kind of explained my scraps of paper and putting the stories kind of gather up. So I kind of have those. So I compartmentalize. And then also, I always try to keep just fresh, beautiful paper for those times when maybe I'm sitting on my porch and the morning is just beautiful and I just feel like something might come out. So for me, I just compartmentalize and just have confidence that at whatever compartment I'm at, that's where I'm supposed to be.
That's so neat. Thank you for sharing. Brian, what are your writing tips for the writers watching right now?
Yeah. Have fun. If it's not fun, don't do it. If you're not having fun writing it, we're not having fun reading it.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the idea of the word and concept of play is the common denominator across my projects and my process. If I'm not playing and having fun and engaging a topic that's intellectually stimulating or inspirational to me, it's really important, no one else is going to want to connect with it. So if I don't connect to it, no one else will. So there's this Joseph Campbell concept, the conceiver of the hero's journey. Follow your bliss. So if something is capturing your fascination, your imagination, like go toward that, because it's probably doing that for a reason. For one example, there's a story that we might start sending out after the first of the year. And this is a book about the power of whispers and like small moments. And I got this idea when I was reading to my son, and I was like whispering the book in his ear, and it was this really intimate, tender moment between us. And it got me thinking about like, what are the contexts that people whisper? Like, there's lots of situations where we whisper, and they're usually really big moments in a small amount of space. And so I just got really like kind of obsessed with whispering and like figuring out when we whisper, until a book came out of that. So if something captures your imagination or is fun or is entertaining you, go toward that, because it's happening to you for a reason. My wife knows that I'm liking a book when I'm writing it, when I'm the one laughing at my own jokes. And she calls me a dork when I do that, but I know I've got something when I'm making myself laugh and I'm having fun creating it. So it should be stimulating, it should be entertaining, it should matter to you. Otherwise, don't waste your time.
That's great advice. Stephanie, what are your writing tips for writers watching right now?
Well, one of my longtime tips, I'm with Leanne. I'm a 4:30 in the morning writer. So I write before work every morning, and I've done it for years. And it pays off. I set a word limit for myself, and I try to hit it. It's shorter on the weekday, longer on the weekend, and it pays off. And then something I've recently started doing, which is new for me, but it works really well, is when I get stuck, I leave the computer and I go to a notepad. And even with the comics, I will draw out the scene, even though I can't draw very well. I'm not the artist, but like it helps me to just go to a different medium and work the story that way. And I usually learn things I never would have learned on the computer. It's a really valuable exercise, and I've used it twice now. And on 2 different books, and it gets me to a certain point, and then I'm able to pick it back up and start writing on the computer again. So I definitely recommend that. And then the third thing I'd recommend is deadlines. I'm a big believer in setting a goal for yourself, saying like, hey, I'm going to show up at this convention, or this, I'm going to set this, I want it done by summer vacation. And holding yourself accountable to that, because you will get through it. It'll surprise you. But you will actually work towards that date.
Yes.
I love that. I love deadlines, but I also really love that you talked about switching mediums or walking away from the computer if you're facing that dreaded writer's block. That sounds very helpful.
It is helpful.
Jessica, what are your writing tips for the writers watching right now?
So I'm just going to speak from the position of a self-published writer, and someone who wants to self-publish. These tips are for you. I will say, know your strong suit. If your strong suit is, I'm just the writer, I'm not the editor, and I'm not the illustrator, I'm not the marketer, I don't know how to do this. Be okay with that and look for help. Look for someone who can help you with that. That'll get you further than just sitting in and dwelling in that and trying to do it yourself and trying to force yourself to be that creative in that area, and you're not. You know what I mean? Find someone who can help you in that area. So just know your strengths and know where you shine brightly in that space. The next thing I would say as a self-publisher is know your budget. And that's not easy to know as the first-time self-publisher. So with that being said, network and ask around. If you know other people who have self-published, or if you can reach out to someone who has self-published, ask them, how much did it cost for an illustrator? How much did it cost for marketing? Like, give me the nitty gritty. I need to know. And then, think on that and write out a budget based on what you can do or what your goal is. Kind of like Stephanie was saying, if your goal is to self-publish in the future, set that budget and then, map out what it'll take to get there. So those are my tips for self-publishing.
That is some wonderful business advice. Thank you for sharing that. I will say we're taking questions from the audience right now. So if you have any questions for these authors, please go ahead and put some comments in the chat below. While we're getting your questions, we're going to go ahead and flash some websites and books again. For you to get to know these authors, you can visit the Mid-Continent Public Library website as well. And we have all of the local author fair panels listed today and those authors, and you can visit their websites. And I highly recommend that you go to their websites, check out their books, see what else they're up to, and give them a follow. While we're waiting on some questions, Jessica brought up this. Oh, there's a question from Maddie Main. What was the hardest thing to overcome as a writer? And I'll just leave this open to anybody who wants to answer it.
Well, for me, it was the waiting. After I already had a contract, and then I was working on the art, and just how long it took to get things right. And then I kind of felt like, well, I told people about my book, and then I wished I wouldn't, because they would say, well, when's it coming out? And I'd be like, I don't know, soon. And so kind of feeling like an imposter. And sometimes I felt I wish I wouldn't have ever started it. And I wish I wouldn't have told anybody. So just kind of the time between when it was done and the time that I actually had a book in my hand was hard and scary.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. Like the Book of Rules took, it was sold in October of 2019, and like this week came out. So that's 2 years and a month. The original publication date was the 19th of October, but hashtag COVID, shipping delays, awkward. That got pushed back a whole month. So the waiting, and then like, what do you do with the waiting? You can't just sit on your hands. You have to keep going and just kind of have that be what it is, because you don't have any control over that. I mean, while this was being brilliantly created by Tom Knight and improved by Melissa Wharton and her editorial staff at FSG Books for Young Readers, there was things I was doing and new projects I was coming up with, and then every once in a while there would be a moment of sharing, like, hey, check out Dennis. We have Dennis now. Like, look at the monster, and it's like, oh my gosh, things are happening. So the analogy I like to talk about is with publishing, it's everything or nothing. And the nothing times of waiting are just kind of like, yeah.
I would definitely say too, the hardest thing to overcome would be, when you're deep in, like I said, I write like 10 drafts. So when you're deep into draft number 7 and you don't think you can come out and see the sun, having the courage to know that you can keep going, because I can't tell you how many times I've discovered something new about a character that I didn't know that meant everything to the story. I know on Starbeast, there was something about Bandit that came up in that 9th draft that I was like, that's it. This is tying it all together. So pushing through and knowing that, give it another go, because you're going to learn something that you didn't know. But it's hard to talk yourself into doing it. And you're just like, I don't want to look at this one more second. But it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I would say Stephanie touched on this earlier, but in those times where you have writer's block, or where you feel like nothing else is coming, like I'm halfway through this, or I'm just at the beginning and nothing else is coming, and just taking a step back and doing something else, go on a walk, or take another whole day and just not focus on that and come back to it. And just not giving in to that feeling of, I don't know what else to do. I'm lost in that. Not giving into that it could be tough, and just holding on to your goal.
And our next question is, do you do NaNoWriMo? And for our listeners who don't know what NaNoWriMo is, that's National Novel Writing Month.
I've never done it. I've always wanted to do it, but that 1,000-word count, that scares me. I know in my time frame I have in the morning, I'm like, oh, I can't get that done. So, but I do try to. There are times of the year where I set time aside, like I'm getting ready for it in December, where I say, all right, I call it like my 10-day draft, where I push as hard as I can for like 10 days to get as much work done. So I do my own little private, but I do think it's a great thing, and I wish I could do it. I don't know why I can't take the job.
I think, Stephanie, you hit the nail on the head with this one. It's like you have a finite amount of time to do something. There's a hard and fast deadline. It's exciting. It's kind of like, and a lot of people do it. So I think it's a wonderful way to generate creativity and get something going. And for the people that are just like maybe for years, they'd be like, I want to write a book, or I've had this idea for this book for years. It's like, here is this kind of external thing that's like, do it. You have 30 days. Come on, let's go. Lots of people are doing it too. And you have that camaraderie or commiseration, or both. And I would love to do it someday. I have ideas for middle grade and young adult novels, if I can ever stop writing picture books, which so far doesn't seem to be the case. But so I think it's a wonderful opportunity that writers should absolutely try. Not just November. There's a camp NaNoWriMo in July. So it's like, just pick a month, There's like, this is the month where you're going to write the dang book, and go for it.
Well, Leanne or Jessica, did you all want to say anything about NaNoWriMo before we moved on to the last question?
I don't participate.
Yeah,
I
I don't either.
march to the beat of my own drummer.
I don't either.
Well, for those of you who are watching who are into NaNoWriMo, the Story Center does have virtual write-ins on Tuesday evenings. That's for NaNoWriMo write-ins. And in December, there's going to be a what happens after NaNoWriMo, what you can do with your project. So I encourage you all to go to our website and check out our upcoming events. This is going to be the last question of the evening. It is, what is your favorite writer tool, and do you have a set routine to warm up? I would love to add on that and just say, if you could share resources for our writers, that would be an excellent way to end tonight's conversation.
Well, I have two books. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go, Leanne. You go.
I just love a beautiful fresh white paper and a really nice fine point Sharpie. I just sit down and work, but I love reading journals by writers, and that is what warms me up. And I always keep Madeline Lingle's crossword journals beside me. I just love the fresh voice, and that's what inspires me and helps me warm up, is reading other people's journals.
I was going to say, I have two books I can show you. This one is called, oops, where's the camera? Oh, guys, there it is. Goal, Motivation, and Conflict. I know it's a really exciting title. I read this book a couple times, every couple of years, because it's so good. Deborah Dixon. It's basically a textbook, and it's fantastic. And it has exercise in it to help you narrow down what your goal, motivation, and conflict is. And then I can't say enough about Comics Experience. This is a book called Writing Comics. And it's really good for just writing fiction, because it helps you, just like the goal, motivation, and conflict, figure out what the backbone of your story is. And they all have wonderful exercises in them in order to get that story out and get the main bone of it there. So it's great.
For resources and tools, there's some really pivotal things that took me from, I think I might want to write a book someday or be a children's author, to I'm going to write a book, and this is going to happen. I'm going to make it happen. And that was membership with SCBWI, Society of Children's Writers and Illustrators. Oh my gosh, the acronym is escaping me. Not going to try it. You know what I mean? My parents gifted me this. Hi, Russ and Linda. Love you. For a Christmas present, because I knew it was something I was kicking around. And they bought me a membership in it. And it was like, oh, I'm a member now, and I have access to a community and a professional industry of like-minded folks that are doing this for their jobs. And that was a huge thing for my writer identity, and to just feel like I was a children's author, part of a community. The other thing that was absolutely transformational, which I highly recommend that you buy every year, is the Children's Writers and Illustrators Market. Now, the one I first got was 2016, And it was a physical book where I read, what does it mean to write a query letter? What are agents looking for? What are actual agencies? And who are these people that are taking submission ideas? There's industry news, and you learn so much about the industry. You go from knowing nothing to knowing, like, okay, I kind of get how this works and what I need to do to start. So that was huge for me. The other tool, the last thing I'll say is other people. I wanted to talk about critique groups and I forgot. Stephanie was part of that first critique group that made the book even happen. And just having people to look at your work and being vulnerable to share what you're writing and to be okay with feedback makes you better. And when you open yourself up like that, and it's reciprocal, right? You can't just get, you got to give. You learn so much about your craft, about yourself, and about your work, because that other perspective is sometimes 100% the difference between not making something happen and making it work.
That's excellent advice. Jessica, would you like to share with us your favorite writing resources and tools?
Sure. I know we have to wrap up, so I'll try to make it quick. My favorite tool, I think I'm kind of with Leanne on this one. I need to see a blank screen or a blank piece of paper and just kind of like jot my ideas down. And then I go into organizing them. But first they have to just kind of splatter onto a page. And then I can go into organizing them. And what I use to organize them, I just use like a doc. Like I just use like a Word or Google Docs or something like that, and just literally organize it in that way and separate it out. And then I go back into actually writing the story. For resources, I would say what's helped me the most is just networking. Like Brian was saying, I've learned to get better at that because I was so like nervous for other people to know that I was the writer behind the book, just in case they didn't like it. It's like, so, but it helps. And it doesn't matter if someone has like a critique that you maybe don't like in the moment, and that's okay. It's only to help you become a better writer and to help you see your book in a different light in future books. So definitely connecting with a community of other writers.
Thank you. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you all today. Thank you so much for being part of our 8th annual local author fair. It means a lot to have readers come out and watch this panel. We have another one that starts at 2:30 with our publications manager, Dave Burns, and I hope you all stick around to watch that one. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you have a great day, and that is all.
Thank you.